Whatever your opinion is of Wyatt Earp, I think it can be generally agreed upon that Wyatt led a very interesting life during a very interesting time in American history. Much of what has been written about him, or shown on the big screen and on television, revolves around his role as a lawman during the Wild West, while other parts of his life have been put in the background. The following are 10 facts about Wyatt Earp that you may not know. Details that are not as readily available, but still add to the fascination with the famed peace officer. What's in a name? You may have seen the popular film Frontier Marshal from 1939, starring Randolph Scott as Wyatt Earp and Cesar Romero as Doc Holliday. But this film is actually a remake of the 1934 film of the same name. Unfortunately, the 1934 film is now thought to be lost. George O'Brien stars as the main character, but the protagonist isn't named Wyatt Earp, but rather Michael Wyatt. Why Michael Wyatt? Well, because Wyatt Earp's wife, Josephine, was still alive, and she threatened to sue 20th Century Fox because it was an unauthorized portrayal of her late husband. So the name of the film, originally named Wyatt Earp Frontier Marshal, was changed to just Frontier Marshal, and the name of the main character was changed from Wyatt Earp to Michael Wyatt. Everybody still knew it was based off of Wyatt Earp though, with one article saying, the screenplay was adapted from incidents in the life of Wyatt Earp, and George O'Brien plays the title part. And another saying, Wyatt Earp becomes a Michael Wyatt in Frontier Marshal. Josephine lived until 1944, so why didn't she sue the studio when the 1939 remake starring Randolph Scott was made? She was going to, but was talked out of it by director Alan Dwan, who met with her and used quite a bit of personal charm to persuade her not to. The 1934 film was not actually the first to have the protagonist directly inspired by Wyatt Earp and the plot to follow the events of his life. That honor goes to the 1932 film Law and Order, the main character's name being Frame Johnson instead of Wyatt Earp. Survived by a younger sister. One sibling did live longer than Wyatt Earp, his younger sister, Adelia Douglas Earp. Wyatt Earp actually had 3 sisters, a half-sister named Mariah Ann, who died at 8 months old in 1839, Martha Elizabeth, who was older than Wyatt, being born in 1845, but who died at the age of 10 in 1856. And then finally, Adelia Douglas, who was born in 1861 and who lived into old age, dying at the age of 79 on January 16, 1941, from pneumonia. Adelia married William Edwards and had 4 daughters and 2 sons, one of whom she named Virgil. Adelia is buried at Mount View Cemetery in San Bernardino next to her husband and her brother James. The ashes of Virgil's wife, Allie, are also buried with Adelia. A long, full life. Out of all his brothers, Wyatt Earp was neither the eldest nor the youngest, but he outlived all of them. In total, there were 6 Earp brothers. From oldest to youngest, they go Newton, who is a half-brother to the rest, born in 1837, James, born in 1841, Virgil, born in 1843, Wyatt, born in 1848, Morgan, born in 1851, and Warren, born in 1855. Morgan Earp would be assassinated in Tombstone on March 18, 1882. He died at the age of 30. Warren Earp would be shot and killed in Willcox, Arizona on July 6, 1900, at the age of 45. Virgil Earp would die of pneumonia in Goldfield, Nevada on October 19, 1905, at the age of 62. James Earp would die in Los Angeles on January 25, 1926, at the age of 84. Newton Earp would die on December 18, 1928, in Sacramento, California, at the age of 91. Wyatt Earp would pass away on January 13, 1929, at Los Angeles, California, at the age of 80. Indian Scare. The 1964 film Cheyenne Autumn is based on the Northern Cheyenne Exodus, also known as Dull Knife's Raid, in which around 300 members of the Northern Cheyenne tribe left their reservation in the Indian Territory to return north. There is a scene in the film in which Wyatt Earp, played by James Stewart, has to deal with the citizens of Dodge City panicking that the Cheyenne Indians were coming close to the town. When the Cheyenne did pass through Kansas in September of 1878, Wyatt Earp was a peace officer there, and he did have to deal with the panicked citizens by helping put out a fire. According to the Dodge City Times of September 21st, 1878, the frequent arrival of couriers and messengers from off the plains bringing accounts of the Cheyenne murder and stealing threw the people of Dodge City into the wildest tremor when it was reported that the Indians were seen within a few miles of the city. The ringing of the fire bell at 2 o'clock, calling upon the people to assemble at the engine house, added zest to the already highly inflamed patriot heart. A call was made to the governor for arms. All the pistols and guns in Dodge were made available, and everybody was ready to fire the savage breast. At this time, flames were seen issuing from the house of Harrison Berry on an island 4 miles west of the city. It was at once rumored that the Indians had fired the house. A locomotive loaded with citizens was at once dispatched to the scene of conflagration, reaching there in time to save the haystacks and stock from the fiery elements. P.L. Betty, Jock Beeson, Wyatt Earp, and S.C. Isaacson were principals in extinguishing the flames. The families of H.P. Neese, George Horder, and Harrison Berry, who lived 3 and 4 miles west, had only a few minutes before hastened to Dodge City. Several Indians were seen in the vicinity, it is said, and the supposition is that the Indians set the fire. But the family left a fire in the stove, and it is thought the fire communicated from the stove. A small role on the big screen. The first film to ever depict Wyatt Earp was not actually focused on Wyatt Earp, but rather gunfighter Wild Bill Hickok. Movie star William S. Hart starred as the titular character in Wild Bill Hickok in 1923. William Hart was a friend of both Wyatt Earp and Bette Masterson, both of whom are portrayed in the film. The character of Wyatt Earp was played by Burt Lindley, who is known for playing minor roles in many Western movies. The film takes place in Dodge City and involves Wild Bill teaming up with the Dodge City Peace Commission in cleaning up the cowtown. The film is considered to be lost, but it is generally accepted that the character of Wyatt Earp had very little screen time, being more of a background character. Wyatt and his wife Josephine were alive when it premiered. Josephine later wrote a letter to William S. Hart saying that she saw it twice with several friends, and each time the house was packed. When you appeared upon the screen, the applause was wonderful. Unflattering depiction. Besides the many photographs that exist of Wyatt Earp, his likeness has been sketched many times over the years, often appearing in newspaper articles about him. But probably the most unflattering depiction ever drawn of Wyatt Earp is a cartoon published in the New York Herald and then reprinted in the San Francisco Call on December 12, 1896. It is entitled "The Bad Man Referee." Coming in a close second to the most unflattering depiction is another cartoon, this time published in the San Francisco Call on December 8, 1896. The title for this is "On the Road to Arizona." So why the hate for Wyatt Earp in 1896? On December 2nd, 1896, Wyatt Earp had served as a referee for the heavyweight boxing match between Bob Fitzsimmons and Tom Sharkey. During the 8th round, Fitzsimmons had been dominating the ring and thought to be the clear winner. However, after a particularly heavy blow to Sharkey by Fitzsimmons, Wyatt called foul and proclaimed Tom Sharkey to be the winner. Many people were upset at Wyatt's call and believed that he had rigged the boxing match. Either he was bribed to do so or had money bet on Sharkey to win. It didn't help that right before the match began, a police captain noticed that Wyatt was wearing a gun and disarmed him of a Colt's Navy revolver he had in his coat pocket. That is why in the cartoon, Wyatt has a gun pointed at Fitz, while he gives the $10,000 prize money over to Tom Sharkey, who is sitting on the floor. The other cartoon also has Wyatt holding a pistol, and Foul Earp is written on his hat. Even today, historians of Wyatt Earp debate what really happened during that boxing match in 1896. Wyatt Earp set sail. Wyatt Earp has had many admirers over the years, one of whom was American explorer Lincoln Ellsworth, who made several trips to the Antarctic to chart new territories and gather other useful information. Ellsworth had repurposed a wooden fishing vessel built in 1919 into a ship that could break through the hard ice of the Antarctic by covering it with 3/4-inch steel armor plate. What did he name the ship? The Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp had been a hero and inspiration to Ellsworth. As he wrote in his book, Beyond Horizons, "This vessel I christened Wyatt Earp, after the famous frontier marshal of the West. On this, my own expedition, I could indulge every whim and fancy that did not interfere with its efficiency. And one of my whims was to imbue the whole enterprise with the spirit of Wyatt Earp, the bravest man I ever heard of." His name lived on. It is rather well known that Wyatt Earp and wife Josephine never had children of their own. However, this did not mean that the name of Wyatt Earp would not be carried on in the family. Wyatt's half-brother Newton had 2 sons, whom he named after his brothers, Wyatt and Virgil, although they were often known by their first and middle names, so Wyatt Clyde and Virgil Edwin. Throughout his life, Wyatt Clyde would often ditch his first name and just go by Clyde, perhaps to avoid confusion or to get away from the tall shadow of his uncle. When Wyatt Clyde passed away in 1937 at the age of 64, his obituary in the Sacramento Bee read, "Kin of famous gunman is dead." Advice to a cousin. Besides his well-known brothers, Wyatt Earp had a first cousin who was also in Kansas during the times of the Wild West. His cousin, George Washington Earp, was the son of Jonathan Douglas Earp, who was Wyatt Earp's uncle. Wyatt was 15 years older than his cousin, and George looked up to him. Some of the stories shared by George Earp are not historically accurate. However, one story he shared is more believable. When George arrived in Dodge City, Wyatt did not want George to follow his footsteps as a lawman and thought Dodge was too rough for his little cousin. And so George was sent to nearby Garden City, where he worked as a cowboy. George Earp stayed in Kansas and in 1885 would survey the town site of Ulysses, Kansas. George promoted the new town and served as its first peace officer. Revenge that never happened. One of the more noteworthy events in Wyatt Earp's time in Dodge City was in October of 1878, when he, along with Sheriff Bat Masterson, Marshal Charles Bassett, Bill Tillman, and Deputy Duffy, tracked down and captured James Spike Kennedy. James Kennedy was wanted for killing beloved singer and entertainer Dora Hand in Dodge City, and the posse was able to arrest him after an ambush near Meade City, in which Baton Masterson wounded Kennedy in the shoulder. Kennedy would be released afterwards, owing to a lack of evidence. Fast forward to 2 years later, and the Caldwell Commercial newspaper of Caldwell, Kansas, wrote that Kennedy had shot and killed Wyatt Earp in Colorado. It is reported that Wyatt Earp, at one time a policeman in Wichita, but more recently of Dodge City, was shot and killed on Sand Creek, Colorado, by James Kennedy of Texas a week or 2 ago. Earp had shot and wounded Kennedy in the shoulder a year or 2 since, and meeting at Sand Creek, both pulled their revolvers, but Kennedy got his work in first, killing Earp instantly. The article got two key things wrong. One, it was actually Bat Masterson who had wounded Kennedy in the shoulder. And two, Wyatt Earp was still alive and had nothing to do with the shootouts with James Kennedy. Now, there had been a shooting at Sand Creek, Colorado in 1880 with a man named James Kennedy. But it is well documented that the man killed was Warren Rockwood and that James Kennedy had killed him in self-defense. Now, was this the same James Kennedy who had killed Dora Hand in Dodge City? Well, I'm not sure. There's enough information there for a whole video to be made in and of itself. Anyways, the folks at Dodge City weren't buying it that Wyatt Earp had been killed. The Dodge City Times wrote, "The above statement is not believed in Dodge City. Earp is engaged as a special messenger by Wells Fargo and Company on a division of the railroad in New Mexico. The story looks like a fabrication." But then the article had to continue and got something wrong. Earp was never engaged in a difficulty with Kennedy. The latter was shot in the shoulder by a posse of officers at one time in pursuit of him. Earp was not of that party. This is funny because it contradicts an article 2 years previous by the same newspaper, the Dodge City Times, that did say Wyatt Earp was a member of the posse. It is generally accepted that Wyatt Earp was there when James Kennedy was captured. In correcting an incorrect article, the Dodge City Times got the explanation wrong and contradicted itself from 2 years ago.